So the Steelers get their first win in Baltimore since 2012. Antonio Brown, all sorts of fired up. Stephen A., was his meltdown a big deal or no big deal?
Well, I think it's a big deal. I think it's a big deal. First of all, let me say this. To get on Antonio Brown a little bit, he's widely recognized as one of the best receivers in the game, appropriately so. He got paid, which is something that he wanted. We know this. But he's got to be a professional. You can't be out there throwing temper tantrums on the sideline, shrugging off the offensive coordinator, and bringing the kind of attention to everybody about your disgust with what transpired, particularly with your quarterback, because Big Ben Roethlisberger is a future Hall of Famer. He's a two-time Super Bowl champion. He's somebody that has a lot to do with the success that Antonio Brown has been recognized for and has reaped in his career. So, yes, it was a bad moment by Big Ben Roethlisberger, make no mistake about it. But Antonio Brown has to check himself. But here's why it's a big deal. Donovan, it's because of what Max and I have alluded to over the last couple of weeks. This ain't the same Big Ben Roethlisberger. Right. The Big Ben Roethlisberger that I've known and admired for many, many years would never have missed that. That's not a mistake that he makes. He's somebody. There appears to be slippage in the game of Big Ben Roethlisberger, who's only completing about 62% of his passes right now. Now, Antonio Brown has been targeted 45 times in 10 games. Okay, he's got about 30 receptions. But considering how wide open he is and the play was for him, and for Big Ben Roethlisberger to miss that play, that's problematic. And the reason I bring it up, Donovan, along with Max, is because what was the storyline coming into this season? Big Ben Roethlisberger, was he going to retire or was he going to play? Yeah. How interested was he in playing the game of football? I believe, and it's just a belief, I believe that there comes a point in time where you sense the slippage just as well as anybody else does, particularly when your interest in the game has dissipated to some degree. It's not that he doesn't care. It's not that he's not going to work hard. It's not that he's not committed to winning. But when you've absorbed as much punishment as he's absorbed, and you're looking at the twilight of your career, and greener pastures are on the horizon, family, health, etc., and you start thinking about that as much as you're thinking about the game itself, I think ultimately it's reflective in your play to some degree. Antonio Brown is all in. It's about football. I think with Big Ben Roethlisberger, as much as he cares and as much of a professional as he is, there are other things on his mind, and I think it has a way of showing itself on that field of play at this particular moment in time. That is not a mistake that I have seen Big Ben Roethlisberger make in the past.
It is a big deal precisely because of that, because of what it shows about Roethlisberger's slippage. That's right. But it's not just that he's big and physical and has a certain style of play, or that he's having an off year so far, or even that he's talked about retirement. You know what they say, when you start talking about it, you're already kind of retired. Look at the quarterback class he came out with. Eli Manning, Phillip Rivers, and Ben Roethlisberger, those three. Now, you can look at guys like Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Brett Favre. Well, they played, effectively until they're 40 or more, right? Yeah, but those guys are better than Roethlisberger and Eli and Rivers. Roethlisberger, Eli, and Rivers really good, and you can put them in any order you want. Most people have Roethlisberger first in that pack, but none of them are Favre or certainly not Peyton or Tom Brady. They're not that good, and they're not that great. They're really good. And so maybe when they have a little slippage, they get kind of closer to average than the other guys I mentioned. Maybe that's happening now because they're all slipping. You also have to look at Pittsburgh as a real missed opportunity. A couple of years ago, it looked like they could have the greatest offense ever when you looked at all their weapons. All of a sudden now they're banged up on the O-line again. I bring it up all the time. It's not hard to figure this stuff out. Banged up on the O-line. Martavis Bryant, also physically compromised. Suddenly that's not the same team you thought it was going to be. But speaking of the kind of weapons he does normally have, which is normally a good O-line, Antonio Brown, Martavis Bryant, Le'Veon Bell, you can look at Roethlisberger's numbers and say, well, his QBR is kind of middle of the pack, even high middle of the pack. But when you look at what Pittsburgh normally has around Roethlisberger, middle of the pack means not that good. Because if you put a decent quarterback in there, they should be better than that, given all those weapons. So I think Antonio Brown's temper tantrum in this case is significant because he's frustrated with the fact that Roethlisberger, that we're all seeing the same thing in Roethlisberger, and he's seeing the same thing too. And Donovan, that's even with acknowledging that the Steelers' offense really is better when Roethlisberger spreads the ball around, right? Like when it's not just about Antonio Brown. But even with that, he got missed when he was wide open. This is something they practice. It's something he's frustrated about, and it points out the problem.